Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Amber and Tyler's Dialogue. I'm Amber Ellsworth, and as always, I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Tyler Ashcroft. If you're tuning in for the first time, this is the podcast where we dig deep into India's global role, its latest developments, and why this ancient land is suddenly the talk of the world in 2025.
Thanks, Amber. It's hard to ignore the headlines these days. Everywhere you look, from Wall Street to Silicon Valley, from Brussels to Tokyo, people are talking about India. And honestly, it's not just chatter. India is actually delivering. Think about it. While much of the world is struggling to keep its head above water, India is projected to be the fastest growing major economy for the third year running. That's not just a win, it's a statement.
Absolutely, Tyler. But here's the thing that really grabs attention. India's not just growing fast, it's growing smart. Despite global headwinds, slowing trade, rising interest rates, you name it, India's economy is forecast to expand by a healthy margin this year. And while that might sound like just a number, consider this. Among the world's biggest economies, no one else is even close.
Yeah, and that's why the West is sitting up and taking notice. For years, India was seen as this giant sleeping economy, full of potential, sure, but not quite ready for the big stage. But in 2025, it's like the spotlight's finally found its mark. Observers everywhere agree, India is leading the pack.
And you know what's really fascinating? It's not just about economic numbers. India's tech sector is booming, startups are sprouting up everywhere, and the country is flexing its muscles in everything from digital innovation to defense. But let's be real, there are challenges too. Private investment is lagging, and job creation still needs a boost. But the momentum is undeniable.
So whether you're a business leader, a policy wonk, or just someone curious about the future of the global economy, you really can't afford to ignore what's happening in India right now. And if you're enjoying the conversation so far, don't forget, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Patreon, and more. All the links are right there in the description.
So let's dive in. Why is India's meteoric rise in 2025 turning heads in the West? And what does it mean for all of us? Stay tuned.
So, Amber, before we get too deep into what's happening right now, I think it's important to look back a little. Just to understand how India got to this point where it's like a global headline almost every week.
Absolutely, Tyler. It's easy to forget, but India's journey to the global stage wasn't an overnight thing. For decades, it was, seen as more of a regional power than a global one. Important in South Asia, sure, but not necessarily setting the agenda for the world.
Yeah, and honestly, that's kind of what made the transformation so surprising. If you rewind to, say, 20 or 30 years ago, India was still really finding its footing after independence. There were big plans, big dreams, but also a lot of hurdles. Bureaucracy, infrastructure gaps, you name it.
Right, and I think that's what makes this story so compelling. India wasn't just handed its spot at the table, it had to work for it, and I mean really work for it. The country had to figure out how to balance rapid population growth, huge diversity, and, the need to modernize without losing its identity.
Exactly. And then somewhere along the way, things started to click. The tech boom in the late 90s and early 2000s, that was a game changer. Suddenly, Indian engineers and entrepreneurs were making waves globally, not just in call centers, but in software, in startups, even in cutting-edge research.
And that was just the beginning. The last decade especially has been wild. The government rolled out massive digital infrastructure projects, millions of people got online for the first time, and local startups began competing on the world stage. It's like all those years of laying the groundwork are finally paying off.
Yeah, and I think that's what really stands out. India's growth isn't just about copying what worked in the West. It's about building its own path, like the way India tackled digital payments. Instead of waiting for banks to catch up, they just built a whole new system that works for everyone.
Exactly. And that's why the West is paying attention now. It's not just that India's economy is growing fast, it's that India's doing things differently. The world is used to seeing countries follow the same old playbook, but India's writing its own, and honestly, it's working.
And here's something that really surprised me. India is not just exporting goods, it's exporting ideas. Think about how many countries are looking at India's digital public infrastructure as a model for their own development. That's a huge shift from where things were even 10 years ago.
Absolutely. And it's not just about tech. India's also stepping up on the world stage in other ways. Climate change, space exploration, even global health. The country's voice is louder and more influential than ever before.
But it's not all smooth sailing. there are still big challenges: poverty, inequality, environmental issues, and the world is watching to see how India handles them. Because if India can pull it off, it could really change the game for everyone.
Right, and that's what makes this moment so exciting. India's not just a rising power, it's a rising power with its own unique approach. And the West is, well, kind of fascinated and maybe a little nervous about what that means for the future.
So if you're enjoying this conversation, and I hope you are, don't forget to share it with your friends or leave a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
And if you're just joining us, welcome. We're about to dive even deeper into what's driving India's meteoric rise and what it means for the world. Stay tuned. All right, Tyler, we've set the stage. Now let's really get into the heart of what's making India's rise so, let's say, impossible to ignore. I mean, you can't just be the fastest growing major economy by accident, right? There are some real engines driving this momentum.
Exactly, Amber. And honestly, it's not just one thing. It's like India's got this whole toolkit of growth drivers, each one adding a little more oomph to the story. Let's start with the big one, government spending. Now, I know that doesn't sound super exciting, but trust me, it's making a huge difference.
Right. When private companies get a little nervous, maybe because of global uncertainty or just waiting to see how things shake out, the government steps in. They're pouring money into infrastructure, roads, trains, housing, logistics. It's not just about building stuff, it's about building the future. And that's creating jobs, boosting demand, and giving the whole economy a lift.
Yeah, and here's something that might surprise you. Even with all the global headwinds, India's got this extra fiscal space to keep spending. That means more projects, more jobs, more momentum. And it's not just about today. It's setting the stage for even bigger growth down the road.
Absolutely. But let's not forget about the people. India's strength is really in its rural backbone. When rural areas do well, it's like a rising tide lifting all boats. And with things like digital payments and better access to services, rural consumption is getting a real boost.
That's a great point, Amber. And it's not just about buying more stuff. It's about people having more money in their pockets, feeling more confident and spending more. That's a virtuous cycle that can really power an economy forward.
Now, let's talk about interest rates. When they're low, it's cheaper to borrow money. For businesses, for consumers, for everyone. And that's exactly what's happening. Lower interest rates mean more investment, more spending, and more growth. It's like the economy's getting a little extra push, just when it needs it.
But here's the thing, it's not all smooth sailing. Urban consumer demand is still a bit shaky, and private investment hasn't really taken off yet. Part of that's because of global uncertainty, trade tensions, tariffs, all that stuff. But even so, there's this sense that things could turn around pretty quickly if the mood shifts.
And that's where the real magic happens. India's got this massive young population. More than half the country is under 30. That's a lot of energy, a lot of ideas, and a lot of people ready to work, create, and innovate.
And let's not forget the tech sector. I mean, India's not just following the global tech trends, it's helping set them. Startups are popping up everywhere, from Bangalore to smaller towns. Digital payments, e-commerce, edtech, health tech, you name it, India's got a startup for it.
It's like the whole country is wired for innovation. And with more and more people getting online, the potential is just staggering. Imagine a country where hundreds of millions of people are suddenly connected, able to learn, shop, bank, and communicate in ways they never could before.
That's the kind of transformation that changes everything. And it's not just about tech. The services sector, things like hospitality, real estate, health, and education, is booming too. That's creating new jobs, new opportunities, and a whole new middle class.
But let's be real. There are challenges. Exports are facing headwinds because of weak global demand and trade tensions. And private investment is still a bit cautious. But even with those bumps in the road, the momentum is still there. The economy's got this resilience, this ability to bounce back.
Yeah, and that's what really stands out. Even when the world is slowing down, India keeps moving forward. The growth might not be as eye-popping as it was a couple years ago, but it's still outpacing everyone else. And that's not just about numbers, it's about confidence, about potential, about a country that's really finding its stride.
And here's a thought that might surprise some listeners. India's not just growing, it's growing smart. It's not just about copying what worked in the West. It's about building its own path, its own solutions, its own identity. That's what makes this rise so unique and so exciting.
And if you're just joining us, welcome. We're about to get into the real insights, what India's rise means for the world, and what comes next. Stay tuned.
Okay, Tyler, now that we've really dug into what's driving India's rise, let's talk about the big picture. What does all this mean for the world? Because honestly, it's not just about India. It's about how India's story is changing the global playbook.
Absolutely, Amber. I mean, think about it. When a country as big and diverse as India starts to move, the whole world feels it. And in 2025, it's not just about economics or technology. India's influence is spreading in ways that are, well, kind of surprising.
Yeah, and let's be real, the West is watching closely. For years, the global order was pretty predictable. The US, Europe, maybe China calling the shots. But now, India's stepping up, and it's not just following the old rules, it's writing some new ones.
Exactly. And here's what's really interesting. India's not just growing for itself, it's becoming a voice for the whole global South. You look at forums like the G20, and India's not just a participant, it's a leader pushing for issues that matter to developing countries.
Right, and that's a huge shift. For a long time, the global South felt like it was on the sidelines. Now, thanks in part to India, there's a real sense that their concerns are being heard. Whether it's climate change, trade, or technology, India's making sure the conversation is more balanced.
And it's not just about diplomacy. India's diaspora is everywhere, from the UAE to the US, from Africa to Australia. Indian professionals, entrepreneurs, and workers are shaping industries, building communities, and honestly, changing the face of global cities.
Yeah, and that's something that's hard to ignore. You walk into a hospital in Dubai or a tech company in Silicon Valley, and you'll find Indian doctors, engineers, and executives at the heart of things. It's not just about numbers, it's about impact.
Absolutely. And let's talk about culture. Indian food, music, movies, they're everywhere. Bollywood is a global phenomenon, and Indian cuisine is like a staple in cities around the world. It's a kind of soft power that's hard to measure, but impossible to ignore.
And here's something that might surprise some listeners. India's not just exporting talent and culture, it's exporting ideas. The way India has built its digital infrastructure, for example, is becoming a model for other countries. Instead of waiting for big tech companies to build everything, India created its own systems that work for everyone, not just the elite.
Yeah, and that's a lesson the whole world can learn from. India's approach is practical, inclusive, and honestly, pretty smart. It's not about flashy gadgets or empty promises. It's about real solutions for real people.
But let's not forget the challenges. India's rise isn't without bumps. There are still big issues to tackle: poverty, inequality, climate change, and the world is watching to see how India handles them. Because if India can find solutions, it could help set the agenda for the whole planet.
And that's where the real opportunity lies. India is not just a rising power, it's a rising power with a conscience. Whether it's climate action, global health, or education, India's stepping up, and that's making a difference.
So, what does this all mean for the West? Well, for one, it means the world is getting more complex. The old centers of power are being challenged and new voices are being heard. That's exciting, but it's also a little unsettling for some.
Yeah, and I think that's natural. Change is never easy. But the West has a choice. It can see India's rise as a threat, or it can see it as an opportunity. And honestly, the smart move is to embrace it. India's not looking to dominate. It's looking to collaborate, to share, to build a better world.
And here's something else to think about. India's success is proof that there's more than one way to grow. You don't have to copy the West to succeed. You can build your own path, your own identity, and still make a huge impact.
Next up, we're wrapping up with some closing thoughts on what all this means for the future. Stay tuned.
Well, Tyler, we've covered a lot of ground today, from India's incredible growth story to its expanding influence on the world stage. It's clear that 2025 is a year when India isn't just arriving, it's truly making its mark.
Absolutely, Amber. And what's really striking is how India's story is resonating everywhere. It's not just about economic numbers or tech innovations, though those are impressive. It's about a country that's confidently stepping into its role as a global leader, shaping not just its own future, but the future of the whole world.
Yeah, and I think that's a message worth repeating. India's rise isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening at a time when the world is more interconnected and more uncertain than ever before. And yet, India's finding ways to turn challenges into optimistic opportunities, to build bridges, and to offer solutions that work for positive everyone.
Right, whether it's through its massive diaspora, its booming tech sector, or its leadership on global issues like climate change and digital inclusion, India's influence is everywhere. And honestly, it's not just about power. It's about partnership. India is showing the world that you can be strong and still be a good neighbor, a good friend, and a force for positive change.
And let's not forget, this isn't just a moment, it's a movement. India's choices in 2025 will shape its path for decades to come. The country's commitment to inclusive growth, to innovation, and to global cooperation is setting a new standard for what it means to be a modern, forward-looking nation.
So, as we wrap up, I just want to say thank you to all our listeners for joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to share it with your friends, leave a comment, or drop us a line. We'd love to hear your thoughts on India's rise and what it means for the world.
And of course, you can find all our episodes on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Patreon, and more. Links are in the description. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, the story of India's rise is just beginning. We can't wait to see what comes next.
Until next time, keep the dialogue going.